Right now it's saying preview. Now we should be live.
Are we live?
Yes.
I'll believe it when I hear it from the audience. Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a happy Snake Day. Today, hey, there we are up on my screen. Today is World Snake Day, July 16th, which is a day devoted all around the world to celebrating snakes and conservation efforts towards snakes because everyone in the world appreciates how great snakes are.
Yes.
This is right smack in the middle of Snake Month, which is a month of celebrating snakes that we do here on the Common Descent podcast, side by side with Croc Month. This is a very extra special Snake Day because not only is this Snake Day in the middle of Snake Month, it is also the Year of the Snake, which is a very exciting time for it to be.
Yeah, perfect synergy.
Absolutely. I'm keeping an eye on all of the things up here, making sure people are seeing us. Hey, people are here. There we go.
Ooh, there we go.
Might have changed.
Yeah, I was checking something, and I forgot that it's capturing that part of my screen.
Yep. Great. Lydia is here. Ali is here. N3 is here. Zelfia is here. Amazing, amazing.
Welcome, welcome,
It looked
everybody.
like maybe we had a little bit of a hiccup because there was a bunch of people watching and then it dipped down and then it came back up. So I don't know if the stream has had a little bit of a reset or something.
Yeah, I don't know. Mine's showing 0 people. So it very well could
That's
just be
not true.
that the
I think
YouTube is hiccuping.
indeed. Well, everybody,
Ali Hakuna Squamata. You.
amazing. So the way that this works is going to be like most of our live streams. We're going to talk a bunch about snakes. Mainly, the main attraction of a live stream is that you, the listeners, are here in the chat and you can say stuff and we'll respond to the stuff that you say as long as it's about snakes. I also, as we have been doing, as has become tradition, I have brought along some interesting snake news from the last year or so
Yeah.
of snake goings on. A couple of quick reminders. This is halfway through Snake Month. We had our snake-themed episode, last episode, episode 221, about legless lizards. There was another episode coming out this month, this coming weekend, in fact, which is not about snakes, but it is part of in Snake Month, so that's fun. The Snake Stuff chat is open in our Discord. People have been having lots of fun discussions about snakes. And most importantly, the Crocs and Snakes tier, which is now the Snakes and Crocs tier, is available on our Patreon. Any donations that we get at that tier during this month will contribute to charitable donations we will be making towards reptile conservation at the end of the summer. This year, we'll be splitting our donation thrice ways. One to the Crocodile Research Coalition, one to the National Parks Conservation Association, and of course, to Save the Snakes. Check out, if you are not already a patron at that tier and you are able and willing to do so, you can do it. You can join that tier. You can support us and our snaky friends at the same time. Amazing. Ali says that's the catchphrase from the Squamates podcast. Really? I don't think I ever noticed that on the Squamates podcast. Fantastic.
Good job to them because that's hilarious.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We love those guys. I am. Yes, Zelfia said, hello and happy day, year, month of snakes. Absolutely. Here in the US, it's day, month, year. But yeah. Ryan is here. Hello, Ryan, and welcome to the Baskin Coil. Very happy to have your participation. Jackie is here, who is a ghost, apparently. And that's fine. Listen, we are open to spectral participants.
I cast Speak with the Dead.
Fantastic. Yes. Amazing. Okay. Audience listeners, while you enjoy, say hi in the chat. Let us know that everything's going good. Say some stuff that you want to say about snakes. Oh, we will also have a Discord Q&A coming up the week after this
Yeah.
following weekend, where we will talk about some topic. We'll have to see what it is. And last thing, this Saturday, a museum meetup. Me and Nora are going to be at the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Drumheller, Alberta. Come say hi. All right, let's talk about some snake news. You want to hear about some fun snake stuff?
Absolutely.
So I've got a handful of different cool newses from. I'm going to start with a couple of conservation themed things because these are pretty cool. This is a paper that came out earlier this year that is looking at the response of puff adders to rodent outbreaks. So this
Oh.
is a thing that happens all, rodents, when conditions get good. In particular, they're looking in Africa, which is where you find puff adders. In the rainy season, you just get these bursts of rodent populations, and they are a nightmare for farmers because they eat all the crops and stuff. Often, we manage these sorts of outbreaks with pesticides, which have various problems, and we sometimes use predators to deal with the rodents. Typically, these are mammals, right? Cats or dogs, things like that. This paper was analyzing basically how good would puff adders be as a preventative measure for these rodents.
Yeah.
And they, spoilers, really good.
Yeah. Not bad.
They found that during rodent outbreak, like a plague, during rodent outbreaks, puff adders will respond to the increased abundance of prey by upping their feeding,
Okay.
and
Okay.
that they can eat several times more. I think the number in the paper was up to 12 times more than they need to
Wow.
because they don't know when they're going to get their next meal, right?
Yeah.
They noted that puff adders can consume up to 10 rodents in one sitting, and then they're ready to eat again in a week. But then, after all that, if they got a healthy amount of food, they can survive up to 2 years without eating again,
Yeah.
which means that they are really good at responding to rodent outbreaks and also really good at waiting. Right? Like if you have a cat, you still have to feed that cat when there aren't a bajillion mice around.
Yes.
But the snakes, I think the press release referred to them as on-call rodent prevention.
That's so cool.
And they are naturally very abundant in many African habitats. So the whole point of this paper was to go, if we can maintain healthy puff adder populations, like, we don't have to manage them ourselves, as long as they're just around in the environment, they act as a natural deterrent to these rodent outbreaks.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, that's awesome because it means we don't have to introduce any animals. Because,
Yes.
barn cats are a very classic example of rodent control, but that still is an introduced animal in most places where you could have a barn cat. This is a situation where, yeah, if you just don't kill the puff adders in your area and allow them to do well, they will do the job and they already live here.
Yes. Which is very cool. Well, and yeah, and they have that wonderful reptilian thing of, I can just wait a year or two
Yes.
and you don't have to worry about me.
Yeah. Cool.
Very cool. Just don't step on it.
Yes.
That's the one thing is just be like snake wise
Yep.
out in the wild and don't step on a puff adder.
That really is the only hitch to that plan, is that this is an animal that is potentially dangerous. And
yes,
because rat snakes are so perfect for here in the US. That's very common. You want to have a rat snake in your barn because they eat the rodents and they are harmless and they're not aggressive.
Yes.
You could just pick them up and move them if they're in the way.
Yep.
They're
Unless
so
you
perfect.
have free roaming pet hamsters.
Yes.
That rat snake is not at all a problem for you.
Yeah.
Although, because a friend of ours who has a farm, I've asked her about it, and she has said that she has tried to keep rat snakes around, but her dogs
Yes,
attack them.
that's the thing, that if they are vulnerable to other animals. Uh, like I wouldn't be surprised even if like trying to keep them in a chicken coop if the chickens wouldn't
Yeah,
attack, or if it would go
I
after
wouldn't put it past chickens.
eggs or chicks. Because
Yes, yeah, and they will eat eggs
yep.
for sure.
So
Um,
it is not perfect, but that's super cool. I wouldn't have thought snakes would increase their feeding at that much. I thought they would have been like, all right, I'm full, I'm good. I had my two rodents.
yeah, a pair, and I wonder how much that varies
Mm-hmm.
from species to species. Puff adders are also specialized. A lot of vipers are specialists in eating mammals and birds.
Yeah, but
Um,
I it makes sense when I think about it from like, you know, the famous things of predators feeding during herd migrations, where it's feast and famine.
yes,
I just never
exactly.
thought about snakes working that way, but that does actually make a lot of sense.
There's also another conservation paper that came out last year that is completely different, but the implications both ways,
Cool.
that looked at snake ecosystems in two pine forests in the Piney Woods region of Texas. And what they were trying to do is look at a highly managed forest, which it means there's lots of controlled burns and there's lots of cutting, like human management of the forest, and another forest that doesn't have very much of that, to see if there's a difference in what the snakes are doing. And what they found is that the more managed forest had a greater diversity of snake species and their diets overlapped more,
Cool.
which suggests that these kinds of management processes can help to mimic the natural, like disasters and forest fires and stuff that would naturally keep a forest healthy, because you want diversity of species and overlap in diet, because
Yes.
that makes your food web stronger, right? If there's only one thing that's eating a particular other thing, if one of those things is gone, now the whole thing falls apart. But if you've got 4 or 5 different snake species that are overlapping, you have a much sturdier food web.
Yes.
And I like the combination of these two, because the second one is management advice that we could use to then effect what the first paper is suggesting to do with the puff adders.
Yes, absolutely. Cool.
Very
Yeah.
cool stuff. Look at all these people who are in here on the thing. I'm going to zoom in on my thing because, again, my touchpad is broken. Rachel is here, who says, hello, my first live stream since becoming a patron. Thank you so much for joining us, both on Patreon and here on the YouTube.
Welcome, Rachel. That's so cool.
Ryan says the Royal Tyrrell is the best museum. Drumheller is the best reason to go to Alberta. That's why we're going.
Nice.
Who else? Well, there was somebody else who said something about museum meetup. Very cool. Fantastic. Great. There's some questions here we can answer.
Excellent.
Anne asks, what is your favorite snake as a kid, and did that favorite change over time?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think it's fair to say that it definitely changed over time. I don't know. I don't remember if I had a specific favorite as a kid, but I feel like if I did, it would have been like cool venomous snakes.
Yes.
Right. It would have been some kind of viper or maybe a cobra. I don't know if I was ever that into cobras specifically.
I think King Cobra was mine for a while because
it's a good choice.
Well, it's got the typical video game stuff going for it of like it's venomous, it's got a cool decorative structure, it's the biggest venomous snake, and it eats other snakes. Like
yes,
it's got the most things of I'm here to kick butt and chew bubblegum.
Yes. Also, king cobra is one of my favorite snake facts that I actually only learned relatively recently, is that they are one of few snake species that guard their nests.
Yeah.
And my favorite thing about this is the way that a king cobra, because they build like these mound nests, which is very unusual. They actually build nests, which is a very unusual thing for snakes to do. But the way that they guard the nest is they just sit on top of it.
Yes.
Because the way that I love to explain this, there's few better ways to keep interlopers away from a nest than by putting a king cobra on top of it.
Yep. It's very cool. So yeah, they were my favorite for a long time. They also just look super cool. Like,
they are very cool.
Their face is very unique. Like a king cobra face looks like no other snake's face, and they're this beautiful deep colors. Like, yeah, just very cool snakes.
I think. Oh, at one point I was very excited about boomslangs. That was another one that I really liked. These days, my favorite snakes, the ones that I tend to mention, are ones that I have had the pleasure of encountering.
Yeah.
Snakes that I know, like I love green snakes here in North America because they are so pretty, and pine snakes, Pituophis. All of that. Ali is here. All the Pituophis, however we're taxonomically dividing them. That's the snake that Coil is based on.
Yes.
The Coil is canonically Coil is a pine snake.
Yeah. Nowadays, I definitely get more excited about more unique snakes. Like, the spider tail viper. Learning about that, it's
so cool.
And that's one I learned about very recently. I think that came up. I think I learned about it first in the mimicry episode. And I think that was the first time I really learned about that snake and like watched videos of it and was like, oh my gosh, that is unreasonably well mimicked of a spider for your tail.
Yeah.
Like, you watch the videos.
Startlingly impressive.
Well, and like you go to watch the video and you know, because the title tells you what the video is, and still you're like, no, for a second it looked like a spider. Like, it took me a second to not see a spider.
Where's the snake? Is it behind that spider?
Yeah. That one is way up there in like this feel very much like the King Cobra felt like a video game character, but for like a fighting game. This feels like a wacky video game thing of like,
like a D&D monster.
Yeah, here's the laundry basket, monster that looks like a laundry basket. And it's like, nothing does it that ridiculously except for this snake.
Emmett said a spider tail viper sounds almost like something someone would make up, and absolutely.
Yeah, it sounds ridiculous, and it is. It is as ridiculous as it sounds.
Emrys points out, in reference to our rodent news, I feel like there would be a correlation between mice population and human hospitalization, which is a fair point. It would be interesting to know, like, what does the human harm amount? How does it compare between a outbreak of rodents versus a healthy population of venomous vipers?
Yeah. Well, that's often the argument I would use when I would be talking with people and snakes would come up at the aquarium or in other situations, and it doesn't work with every person, because I'd say I'd prefer to have a snake in my house than a mouse in my house. And tons of people would be like, well, no, I absolutely prefer to have the mouse. I was like, that's fine. The snake's not going to eat my food. The snake's not going to chew holes and stuff in the pantry. It's not going to poop all over my containers, because that's not where the snake's going to be.
It's unlikely to spread disease or parasites to you. It's not impossible. They can, but far less available overlap than with another mammal.
And when I move the snake out of my house, it doesn't immediately seek its way back in.
Yes.
Mice are actively trying to get into my house. So I would prefer to be dealing with snakes getting in my house every now and then than a mouse.
Yes. Now, and off the top of my head, I don't know I don't know off the top of my head how dangerous puff adders are.
Yeah.
Because here in the U.S., we have the very beneficial situation of we have dangerous snakes, but the snakes that we have in the US by and large are tend not to be deadly,
Yes.
and we have lots of very readily available medical facilities. So like almost nobody ever dies in the US from snake bite. I think that like the average over the last number of years is like 5.
Yeah.
Like if you get bit by a snake, you're probably fine. And if you get to a hospital, you are almost certainly fine. Puff adders, I don't know because it's a different snake, but also their habitat might overlap with places that don't have as readily available medical. So like a person freaking out because there's a venomous snake in their house is a completely reasonable,
Oh yeah.
like absolutely that is a valid reason to be concerned.
If I wake up and there's a copperhead in my living room, my heart rate is going to be up because
Yes.
I will be running through. How many times did I walk by you before I saw you? It's like that's scary. Uh, the other thing that made me think of with our luck here in the U.S., we're also lucky in the fact that the most common venomous snakes we have a warning system because they're rattlesnakes.
Yes.
So they tell you very readily, hey, go away, walk somewhere else. And then the
Yes.
worst venomous snake we have, which is the coral snake, is so unlikely to bite you. You have to basically pick it up to get bitten. So you really have to ignore the bright colors and go looking for this itty bitty snake because they're not huge. Like
No, and they spend most of their time in soil or litter. Like you hardly ever even see them.
so like you have to go out of your way. You almost have to go out of your way to get bitten by a lot of our venomous snakes here. Not saying everyone who gets bitten was being dumb or anything, but that
Right.
it is hard to
Although,
just get to for them to just it is very easy to avoid them.
yeah. Emmett asks, did you ever have a chance to interact with a very big snake? A big python or an anaconda? I find it fascinating how incredibly strong they are and how big they are. I have definitely interacted with pretty sizable snakes, but like a big pine snake, or there was when we met. I think this was in South Dakota or South Carolina. I've got a picture of us, a handful of us holding like some big python,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but big like maybe 3 meters.
Mm-hmm.
So not huge, but pretty big. I've never gotten to directly interact with like a giant snake.
Yeah, I've gotten to touch big snakes. Uh, the pythons we had at the aquarium, I think our biggest one was pushing 12 feet,
All right.
maybe it was only like pushing 10, but it the big female was big. And the only reason she didn't weigh as much as you'd expected is because she had a snake hysterectomy uh, due to the
Sure.
diseases. So she had
Yeah, yeah.
was missing a fairly large organ. um, but I got into touch like put fingers on that big a snake. But the biggest one I've ever handled was a eastern rat snake. Ours was 5 foot long. I think it was I think he was 5 foot.
Yeah.
So not massive, but holding him in your hand, hefty snake. That ends up being a lot more snake than you think it would once you're holding it in one hand.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love someday to get to be one of 5 people struggling to hold up a big anaconda or a Burmese python or something.
Yeah, no wait, that snake may have been 8 foot. I'm thinking of the other snakes that were like 4 and 5. He was like
Okay.
8 foot. He was
Eight's pretty good.
he was
Eight
a
is
hefty
about as big
snake.
as North American snakes. Like 2.5 meters is about where North American snakes tend to cap out.
Yeah, he was hefty. I can't remember exactly his size, but he was just a chunker of a snake, about yay big around.
Let's see. Martin is here. Hello, hello, hello. Nancy is here and almost forgot. We're glad that you didn't. Sarah Grace is here. Happy Snake Month and asks, what is one snake you'd love to find out in the wild? Well, I happen to know that during our trip to Alberta that we're going to be going on, we are going to be passing through and spending some time in areas that do get pine snakes, bull
Hey,
snakes. I don't remember what they're called. Ali can tell me where the names differentiate. But Pituophis is available, and I would love to see Pituophis. I've
yeah.
seen them in the wild once or twice, but I do love encountering them.
The uh I don't know if I have like a one that I like a wild one that I haven't seen. Uh so yeah. Anything. Seeing a wild snake is always a good day.
Actually, I would also love to see. I don't think I've ever encountered an adult rattlesnake in the wild.
Oh yeah.
I've encountered copperheads and cottonmouths, and I encountered at least one baby rattlesnake.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I've never actually, and I've seen rattlesnakes in captivity, but I've never actually encountered an adult rattler
Yeah.
in the wild. And we are going to be in places that get rattlesnakes.
There you go.
So here's hoping I see one from a safe and respectful distance.
Yay.
Um, Here's some more news, some more fun snake news. I got a couple of newses here about interesting features of snakes, new insights. My favorite one is a paper came out that's actually just came, I think this was this month. Um, a new type, what appears to be a new type of cell discovered in the digestive tract of snakes.
Huh.
So here's an interesting, weird thing that snakes do. Snakes eat their prey whole, even vertebrate prey, which means that snakes are swallowing entire skeletons.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that they can break down the skeleton and dissolve the skeleton because snakes rarely ever have bone in their poop. So that, and they don't spit it back out. So they are digesting that bone. But chemically speaking, the skeleton contains a lot of calcium and phosphorus, which you need some of. And in fact, I think the paper said if some snakes, if they don't eat whole prey, they end up with like calcium deficiencies because they are
Oh
getting
yeah.
their calcium from the skeleton. But they need to have a way, like a whole skeleton is too much. So
Yes.
they need to have a way to be managing that. And here, these researchers investigated the intestinal lining of, I think they started with Burmese pythons, but it looks like they also looked at some other snakes. And they found these cells that they hadn't been described before that contain these large particles of accumulated calcium and phosphorus ions. Basically, little like I'm picturing like in the laundry, the filter that collects all of the stuff.
Yeah.
They found that fasting snakes, so snakes that haven't eaten in a while, those cells are present, but there is an empty space within the cell. And in snakes that are fed boneless prey, so they're fed without bones, those cells are present and they don't produce anything special. But when snakes eat whole prey or calcium supplements through their diet, those cells fill up with these particles made of calcium and phosphorus.
Oh.
So these appear to be specialized cells for sequestering these extra materials from the bone. They mentioned that they've identified this in some other snake species, plus Gila monsters. And
Cool.
so this might be more widespread than we knew.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because there's tons of animals that eat their prey whole and are processing it that way. So it would absolutely make sense if we saw this in other groups. That's super interesting. I hadn't thought about needing to deal with all that excess calcium.
Yeah. Another
Huh.
interesting one, where did it go? Another paper that came out last year was looking at ultraviolet coloration in snakes. So this is something, we don't see UV. So when we look at a snake, we're seeing the patterns in visual light. But like a lot of animals, they can also have ultraviolet colors on their bodies.
Yes.
This is a paper that was basically like, do they have it? How much do they have it? They looked at 110 snake species across North America. They found that ultraviolet coloration is present in about 90% of them, with differing patterns and just the way that their visual patterns change. And they looked to see if there was any correlation between how much UV coloring there was and other aspects of their lifestyle. Can we find what this might be related to?
Yeah.
They found that it was not always correlated with close relationships. So it's something that seems to be evolving and maybe unevolving many, many times. It is also not sexually dimorphic.
Okay.
And that's interesting because that would have been my first thought.
Yeah.
Is this some sort of sexual signaling thing? But males and females are exactly the same. And I think if they said that age-wise, it sounds like there might be some variation in terms of age, but not necessarily what you might expect to see if it was a sexual thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So instead, it seems to be more about signaling to other species.
Yeah.
Right, to predators or things. But also, it was not correlated with venom.
Okay.
So it's not like a aposematic thing. And it doesn't seem to be correlated with mimicry. Like, it doesn't seem like it's mimicking dangerous species. What they found is that it was most correlated with snakes who spend their time in trees and snakes who are active at night.
Okay.
And the authors suggest that this seems to indicate that it's probably some sort of anti-predator coloration for predators that would be present in those environments. And they found that the frequencies of the UV coloration are a pretty good match for the frequencies that we know are detectable by birds.
Yes.
So it looks like the UV coloration in these snakes is probably camouflage, because a lot of plants also produce or reflect UV, and or like startling coloration.
Yes.
The way that like a cottonmouth opens the mouth as like, here's a flash of bright color that maybe you weren't expecting that will give the predator pause for long enough for me to run away.
Yes.
So it looks like they might be using UV specifically to defend against birds.
Cool. That it's fun learning about that kind of stuff because UV is so invisible to us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got that thing of, it's hard for me to think of how you having UV coloration could be camouflage because I can't picture that blending into anything, because whenever we see image rendering of camo, it's these bright neon colors because that's how we have to blast it with a black light, to get the effect, which is not the way it's looking exactly to the animals that see it. So it's cool to learn about how widespread it is and the different uses of it. That's very neat.
Yeah. Look at all these people who are here in the chat. Garrick has pointed out in our comparing rodents to snakes discussion, snakes also don't go from 1 to 1,000 in short order.
Yes.
Which is also another nice thing about snakes.
Harder to have a plague of snakes.
Yes, it sure is. Kayleen says, I have a friend who has had a negative experience with a snake in a toilet. I would probably still choose a snake, but it would be a tough call.
Yep.
And Kayleen adds, it was also on his birthday, poor guy.
Oof. Happy birthday, toilet snake.
I've seen snakes on a plane. Mm-hmm. That also happens in Snakes on a Plane.
Yep.
I think multiple times, actually. I think someone gets bitten on the butt, and I think someone gets bitten not on the butt.
Yeah, like a snake showing up in my toilet would not be a fun surprise. But as they made their point, having a rat swim up my toilet pipe and appear in my toilet bowl, I definitely think I would like less. Because even if a snake bites me on my butt and or unmentionables, it's not going to chew on them.
Sure.
Like,
And it's not going to give you rabies.
it's not going to give me rabies. And rats, they gnaw. Like a freaked out rat is going to try to go through me to get out.
Yes.
A freaked out snake is maybe going to bite me and then coil back up. Like,
Yes.
I'm not necessarily going to have to go to the emergency room. uh so yeah, I don't want a scared mammal near me in that situation.
Amazing. Cole is here. Hello, Cole. Sasha is here. Hello, Sasha. Um, Nancy says Bullet Train had a snake on a train. That it sure did.
Yes, it
Absolutely.
did. It
Oh,
also
Delphi,
ended
I'm
up in a
bouncing
toilet.
around a bunch. Oh yeah.
Didn't bite anyone from the toilet, but that is where it ended up.
Snakes in toilets are not uncommon
Yes.
because they do get into like the pipes and stuff.
Yep.
That happens a lot in places like Australia. It's
Mhm.
especially very common for like dangerous snakes to end up in your toilet.
Yes. Yep.
I'm bouncing around, so hopefully I'm not missing too many things. Zelfia said, coolest snake I ever saw in the wild was a black mamba in Zambia. That's extremely cool.
That's really, really cool.
And says, curious, Will and David, about your coolest snake observations. One of my favorite examples was watching green snakes. I don't remember if it was rough or smooth green snakes in the branches and on the grass swaying as a form of motion camouflage, swaying slightly like they're in the breeze, is very cool. That was very memorable.
Yes. The coolest one I think I ever had was the one time I did have a close encounter with with a big rattlesnake. I was young. I was very young. I was at a summer camp and we were doing a nature walk, and we're walking, and then our guide was just went, "Whoop, everybody stop." And about like, I don't know, 15 or so feet ahead of us, maybe 20 feet ahead of us, there was a timber rattlesnake that was just laid out like almost perfectly perpendicular across the path. So I don't know if like it had been sunny earlier or something, if this was like a good spot for it, or if it had just been moving and stopped when we got there. But then there was like a pause, and it fully noticed us and then started rattling its tail and then slithered away up and over a hill. And it was very cool because
cool.
The snake had to be at least somewhere between 2 to 3 feet long, so not crazy big, but definitely bigger than a small, and it might have been bigger. This is an old memory, so it might have been over 3 feet. But it was big enough to like see it out there.
Yeah. That's cool.
And I didn't know that they could rattle and slither at the same time.
Yeah, they sure can.
It just had its tail up and kept doing it the entire time. It just steadily, like a train, moved over the hill.
Yeah.
And it was very cool. I remember having that, like, are we going back now, or can we stay out here? He's like, yeah, we'll be fine. Like, we can finish the walk. It's not coming back.
Yeah, it's over there now.
Yeah, we're not going to go over where it is, so it's fine. That was pretty cool.
Were you there also when we were on the herping trip and found that mud snake, the one with the pokey tail?
Yeah,
that was very cool. First of all, mud snake's beautiful.
Very cool.
Just gorgeous. It was just like purple on the back and orange on the belly, but they also have a very like blunt, like short but pointed tail.
Yes,
that they'll use for like, they'll like get a grip with it, but they also use it defensively as like poke. And we would hold it and it would just like dig its
Yeah.
tail into your hand to be like, let me go.
Bring the tail around and just kind of go.
Yep.
And yeah, it was fascinating because that was also the first time I learned that there were snakes that had tails like that. Like,
yeah.
had never encountered that as a thing. And it was because otherwise it was a very calm snake. Like, it didn't try biting, it didn't strike. It would just let its displeasure be known by jabbing you with its little slightly sharp tail.
Yes. Ali says, yes, Bullet Train had a boom slang that looked suspiciously like one of those Asian beauty rat snakes. I do remember watching that and being like, it's cool that there's a snake here. That is in no way a boom slang.
No.
And I also noticed that Sarah Grace simply said, the boom slang, which I think, A, very funny, B, great taste in movies, and C, I like that the little crown says #1 next to that comment, which I think is excellent work. All right, who else? We gotta bounce around. Ali also asks, do snakes have distinct neck, thoracic, and lumbar vertebrae? Snakes have cloacal vertebrae. So there are a handful of vertebrae around the they're not hips, once upon a time, but the cloacal vertebrae tend to be distinctive, and the tail vertebrae are distinctive. If you pick one up and you know what to look for, you can say that's a tail vert, that's a cloacal vertebra. All the rest are kind of in a gradual spectrum. So like the 15th vertebra and the 150th vertebra will look different, and you will be able to say this is from the front of the body and this is from the back of the body. But where one grades into the other it's very hard to put a line there. So they don't have distinct regions in the skeleton the way that most other animals do. But they do have like the suggestion of a neck as separate from a thorax.
Which is the grading vertebrae to me feels like a very satisfying way to show how specialized they've become and how long they haven't had legs.
Yes. And as we mentioned in the legless lizards episode, snakes are a very rare case of legless lizards that have zero remnant of those front legs, and most of them have basically zero remnants of their hind legs. Most legless lizards have at least a little bit of something remaining. Snakes often do not, which is very cool. They are very committed.
Yeah.
Ryan says, what's the smallest snake you've gotten to interact with? I have definitely interacted with ringneck snakes, and I think worm snakes, which tend to be quite wee. I don't think I've ever personally interacted with like a blind snake.
Yeah.
Which would be, although statistically speaking, I've probably been very close to a blind snake.
Yeah, ringneck I think is the smallest I've ever gotten to actually interact with. So tiny.
They're so cute. They're so little and cute. You'll see a lot of videos of like I'll see pictures and videos on social media of like little kids with like a little ringneck snake. And it's very fun because it's you're getting to interact with nature. But I think those kinds of snakes, it's a really cool demonstration of how to be gentle with wildlife, with animals. Because like that snake is so small.
Yep.
It is so small, and it would be so easy to accidentally hurt it. And watching kids who are just like, who have learned to just like, you just let it sit. You don't even need to hold it. That's a fun connection with nature.
Yeah.
Martin asks, do snakes have only one ovary like they have only one lung? I believe it varies, but I do think most snakes have only one functional ovary, the same way that they have only one functioning lung. They are one in front of the other, like the lungs, the kidneys, the testes are like that. I do believe that that is true, that most snakes have only one working ovary.
And it's working
Very
overtime because they
fun.
can have lots of eggs.
Yes. Jackie asks, can snakes see in UV? Yeah. Most, like being able to see UV is pretty common across reptiles in general, I believe. Sasha pointed out that UV patterning is evident in the leucistic or pastel ball python's morphs and is useful in determining masked color morphs. That's cool. So you put a snake under a black light to like figure out which morph it is.
That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Very cool. Oh boy, there's so much. Sarah Grace says, so there was a pesticide that impacted the calcium birds could produce for their eggs. Could something like that also impact snake eggs? I would imagine.
Yeah. That pesticide was DDT, for anyone wondering. That's the one that
Right.
nearly wiped out pelicans from Florida and impacted a lot of birds because it doesn't allow them to form a full eggshell. And it was bioaccumulation. Fish eating the insects that were poisoned, the birds eating the fish, built up the levels in the predator. So if the prey animals that snakes were eating, I don't see why not.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I don't think that snakes are eggs are as calcium dependent because they're not hard shelled.
Yes.
And that is a very distinct bird feature among modern animals, that hard shell requires extra material. But other animals with eggs are still using calcium and other minerals to build the egg shell and various membrane.
Yes.
Ali has also pointed out that in Alberta it is bull snake, subspecies of gopher snake. I guess I could just start saying gopher snake for everybody. But yes, bull snakes. Can't wait. Very exciting. Great. Alex asks, if rhynchocephalians had developed a snake form before squamates, do you think they'd rule the world today? All right. I'm gonna make a disappointing statement. I don't think so. I think the odds are against them. And I only say that because lizards have developed limbless forms dozens of times, and only one of those lineages has taken over the world.
Yeah.
So I actually I don't think we have any limbless rhynchocephalians in the fossil record. So rhynchocephalians is the group that it includes today only tuataras. So I suspect odds are rhynchocephalians would have just been another instance of burrowing legless reptile. But if they did the snake thing first, then there may not have ever been snakes.
Yeah. Well, it's why it's always difficult when like alternate evolutionary histories comes up of, what if this group didn't go extinct? And it's like, who knows? There's so many things that then could have gone differently.
Right.
It is, as soon as you change one thing on the evolutionary tree of life, like history, anything is possible, because who knows what that would have set off.
Lots of talk about sharp-tailed snakes. Lexi has contributed and says Metal Gear Solid has a snake on the plains.
That is true. That is very true.
Excellent. Great work. Cole says, what snake is the most energetic, and would it be a good idea to give one a Red Bull? No to the second part. I just assumed that would be poisonous for the snake, because I assume that it's poisonous for me.
Yes.
I have said this before. I find that in my personal anecdotal experience, elapid snakes tend to be very active.
Yes.
Like every time I've ever seen a mamba in an enclosure, they're always moving and active and moving around. I don't know if that's universally true. I feel like maybe I asked All this. Everybody go back to our Snake Month bonus episode a few years ago where we had Hiral Naik on from Save the Snakes and see if I asked her this question. I think I might have. But at least that's in my experience, is that they tend to be pretty active.
Well, I think we got to talk in person when we were at the South Carolina Zoo on that herp trip, and that question came up of the difference between elapid venomous snakes and vipers in their behavior. And the thing that stuck out to me was them saying that they found that the vipers were much more hazardous to work with because the mamba you could keep track of because it was doing stuff. And he's like,
Sure.
but that going into the enclosure with the vipers is like walking into a room full of bear traps that they're not moving, they're not doing anything. If you miss one and step near it, that's how you get bit. While the mamba, you can see what it's doing because it's doing stuff.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yep.
Great. Emrys asks, do you have any pet snakes? What would be your dream pet snake? I do have a pet snake who is a steppes rat snake. A dream pet. I mean, I'd love to have a bull snake. They're so cool. And they can be like 5 or 6 feet long, which would be very exciting.
Yeah.
To just have like a big, not unreasonably big, but like a nice big chunky snake.
Yeah, that would be pretty awesome.
And related, Alex asks, are crocodilians good pets? And if not, are snakes superior?
They are definitely superior pets.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, and it should be specified, not all of them are superior pets.
Nope.
There are lots of options. The thing is that 0% of crocodilians are good pets. And a moderate amount of snakes can make effective pets.
Yeah, like I also will never support or just like when I get posts on Instagram and stuff, I just skip by or mark not interested when it's people with venomous snakes. Because unless you're a facility, I don't think anyone needs a venomous snake as a just home pet snake. That's not a good idea. It's not worth it.
Agreed. Yeah, I was seeing a video that came up on something on social media recently that was a guy doing like a classroom presentation, I guess, with some kind. I think it was a rattlesnake. And he was like, he put it on the floor and he was like stomping around near it to show that it wasn't, and it would just sit there and like try to move away from him. And he was doing it as a demonstration of like, look, it's not trying to chase me. It's not trying to bite me. It just wants to be left alone. And I don't know anything of it. So like, I don't know the background. I don't know who this person is, but that was my immediate thought was, this is a great message that you're trying to deliver, but I don't agree with the presentation of it.
Yep.
But just having a venomous snake, putting yourself intentionally in a position to be in conflict with a venomous animal that does not seem safe or ethical.
Yep. And yeah, crocodilians fall into a similar category. There are crocodilians you can buy in the pet trade, mostly caimans. I think you can maybe get the dwarf crocodile, and I think those are really it because they're small enough. None of them are a good idea because even the smallest ones can send you to the hospital, and
yeah,
it's an animal that you shouldn't ever pick up once they're above a certain size, and it's the same thing as having other wild animals. Like, could you have a bobcat as a pet? Like, it fit in your house, and I'm sure if it was a condition to be with people, you could have them be pretty calm. You shouldn't. You should not have a bobcat as a pet. That's just a bad idea.
Zelfia asks, will we ever get a pet snake appearance on a live stream? Maybe. We could maybe make that happen. I don't handle him very as much these days because he is old and a little crotchety
Yeah.
and appears to be blind in one eye. He's been around a while. So he's a little bit jumpy
Yeah.
these days. Although even still, once I like have him in my hand, he's usually fine. But I try not to stress him out any extra these days. He used to be a really great like handling snake, and he's still good once you're handling him. But it seems like he gets more anxious and stressed out about being disrupted these days. So maybe it's not a no, but he is less active these days.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some more news. I got some more news here. What did I? Oh, right. Okay, these are extremely cool. So I have two newses that are both from earlier this year about research looking into snake interactions with other animals. The first is looking at desert wood rats. So desert wood rats are rodents that are found in the southwest US. As the name implies, they live in deserts and dry, arid environments. One of the things that is notable about desert wood rat, these are Neotoma or something. One of the things that's notable about this species is that they have a natural resistance to many toxins. They actually eat creosote resin, which is toxic, and they have a resistance to the venom of rattlesnakes, which overlap with where they live and will occasionally try to eat them. This paper wanted to basically was like, does their venom resistance vary in different situations? So they took blood samples from these wood rats and exposed the blood samples to venom in different conditions. And it sounds like what they were trying to test for was their diet. Cool. So they tested wood rats that were fed on their native diet versus a diet given to them in the lab. And they found that wood rats eating their native diet of creosote resin did do better at resisting the venom, or at least their blood did. They weren't envenomating the rats. But as an unexpected thing that happened in their study, they also found that the venom resistance varied based on the temperature that the rats were living at.
Oh.
That wood rats that had been acclimated to cooler temperatures were less able, their blood was less resistant to the effects of the venom.
Huh.
Which suggests that both diet and temperature can affect the venom resistance of these animals, which they point out, like, this could mean that they're, like, the relationship between wood rats and snakes might be different in different times of the year or different parts of their range. But also they pointed out that other studies have found that some toxins in snake venom vary with temperature.
Oh.
And it might be related to the fact that some toxins might be more or less effective against prey in different temperatures, which is very cool.
Yeah, that's a very interesting concept.
And then I've got another one that will enjoy immensely.
Woo.
This is about snakes and ants.
Woo!
So, a thing about snakes have, this is common across snakes, have scent glands. They have these cloacal scent glands in their butt region, where most of the time when we notice this is that they will secrete stinky fluids as a defense mechanism. This is really common in snakes. If you've ever gone out picking up wild snakes, a lot of them do this. Garter snakes, I don't know if garter snakes are particularly known for this, or if that's just what comes to my mind.
Yep.
Because I believe I have been stinked on by a garter snake.
Gross.
These secretions, previous research has noticed that ants tend to avoid these secretions. And at least one study has found that some of the compounds in these snake scent gland secretions might have like anti-insect attributes. So this study was basically like, okay, what's the deal with snake stink and ants? So they collected samples of butt secretions from various, it sounds like predominantly burrowing pythons, but also other snake species. And they did experiments with fire ants and carpenter ants. In one round of experiments, the ants were presented with different combinations of different fluids, so like water or sugary water or whatever. And they found that the ants overwhelmingly avoided going near the snake secretions.
Cool.
And this, I'm just going to read, this is a quote directly from the paper. Pure or diluted scent gland secretions applied directly to ants induced a high percentage of paralysis and death.
Oh, wow.
So apparently, snakes have a built-in insecticide.
Yeah.
Possibly specifically for ants.
Interesting.
And apparently, it is suspected that this is present in blind snakes as well, which would indicate that this is a very early feature of snakes, and it might be across all of snakes.
Very interesting.
How cool is that? I love because we've talked about this on the podcast, the idea of these are snakes. Snakes are ubiquitous. They are one of the most successful groups of animals in the world. We talk about how many other animals have evolved specific behaviors in response to snakes because of how ubiquitous they are. Well, snakes have evolved specific reactions to ants.
Yeah. I wonder, because that's such an interesting note. I also wonder, since it's cloacal secretions, I wonder if it helps in like protecting eggs.
Oh yeah.
Like, does any of this get on the egg when they lay eggs? Is this a way to keep ants away from nests? Very cool.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
Huh.
Amazing. All right, let's see. What do we got? What do we got going on here? Cole says, what are some interesting snake fossils that have been in the news in the last year? Well, so the thing is, there have been new snakes published. So there was like, I think earlier this year, I'm going to sneeze. There was a paper that published a new species.
Bless you. He only gets
of
one.
Snake from I think it was the Miocene of France, but it's like vertebrae. And often that's the case where it's like, yeah, here's some vertebrae, and this appears to be a new thing of snake. The most exciting new snake published in the last year or so was Vasuki indicus, which was published early last year, which is now one of the two biggest snakes ever known to have existed.
Yeah.
Vasuki, very cool. It was all over the news. You can check it out. Also, I mentioned Vasuki in that SciShow episode about giant snakes. There's a SciShow episode that came out just a few weeks ago about giant snakes. You should go check it out. Vasuki does get a mention in it. Martin says a show mentioned a fossil snake with over 1,000 vertebrae, if I recall. That sounds wrong. Snakes, and I'm perfectly happy to say that the show was lying and not that you, dear listener, are lying, because you're great. 1,000 vertebrae, most snakes today can get up to like 300. 1,000 would be a whole bunch.
Yeah, that'd be a lot.
And I don't know of any fossil snake that has. I don't think I know of any fossil snake that has like an unusually high number of vertebrae. Although, if you, for argument's semantics sake, if you had a snake that had several baby snakes still within it, that would be a snake with over 1,000 vertebrae.
Yeah, it would.
And there is that one fossil snake that was discovered with some baby snakes inside that it appears to have been preparing to give live birth to. So that snake, maybe. That snake might count, actually. Amazing. Zelfia asks, how can you differentiate species and unique attributes from fossils when so much of the identifying stuff is soft tissues? Excellent question. The shortest and simplest answer is often you can't. With snakes in particular, most identification of fossil snakes is done with vertebrae, which is very limiting in terms of behavior or other soft tissue things. We obviously don't get any color patterns, but the anatomy of those bones does change from snake to snake. If you're lucky enough to get skull bones, you can identify snake to snake. And then there are some fun correlations. So like you can find a vertebrae and go, this is this group of snakes, but the shape of the vertebra, and if you have more than, if you have part of the whole skeleton, the proportions of different parts of the skeleton can correlate with like if it was climbing trees or if it was burrower. So you can get some of that information.
The way I often like to think of it is that when we identify species in the fossil record, it is very likely that if we were able to time travel back or magically get DNA to do more detailed species identification, that most fossil species would probably include 2 or 3 species that we can identify as distinct populations. But when we're only able to look at the bones, the differences don't show up there. It's like there's tons of animals today where these different species can all breed and are all very similar, but they are distinct genetic populations. And so they have gotten different names. That probably would happen with most groups of fossil animals just because it's very likely we are missing some of the detail.
Yep. Martin said, let me back out of the room. I'm a locksmith and not a biologist. Gravid snake is a nice recovery. No worries, Martin. That is perfectly. Listen, we are here to address scientific questions. Nancy has made a donation.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you so much. We love that. That's a little coffee donation, which Will and I will use for something else. There's so many people. You people are all awesome. Ali says, yes, garter snakes very commonly musk, and so does Nerodia. That doesn't surprise me. Water snakes. Nerodia, water snakes seem to be like their main defense mechanism is just to be unpleasant.
Just nasty.
They're really, they've got a reputation for it. Martin asks, why would snakes want to chase ants away? Food competition, or are ants that dangerous to the snake? It could be food, certainly could be a thing, but the answer, you don't want ants.
Yeah. It's very common. We talked about this in the ants episode a bit, that there are tons of examples. Yes. Of animals that just are known to avoid ants because dealing with ants is very often just not worth it. Not that they will kill you for sure, but just that they are really good at being a lot to handle.
Well, and they can, obviously, like ant, especially for a small snake, ants could absolutely be dangerous too. The ants that they tested in that study were predatory ants.
Yes.
In particular, that ants that could be trying to eat these snakes. As you mentioned, Will, ants can also cause huge problems for nests or young snakes. I know ants are not. You don't want to be on the wrong side of ants.
No, they are very good at what they do. I know that there also are snakes that eat insect larvae.
Yes.
And so I wonder if any of them have it as a defense to get into nests and eat eggs and larvae and stuff. Because isn't it I never remember the name of it, the one with the saloon door mouth.
Yeah, I believe that's one of the blind snakes. And yeah, they eat a lot of larvae. I don't know if there are snakes that specialize on ant larvae
Because I think they were,
off
when
the
I
top of my head.
remember the documentary I saw of that one, they was termite larva that one went for.
Yes, I think that's right.
And so yeah, it makes me wonder if there are any ant specialist snakes out there. Like surely there have to be, just because of like
Because ants.
because
Because
ants.
ants and snakes.
Like it's very funny because we were just saying like a ton of things avoid ants. It feels like life either goes with, hey, you just don't mess with ants, or you become the best at messing with ants, and you get ant eaters and aardvarks and horny toad lizards and things that
Yep.
like 90% of their diet is ant.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Nancy asks, why no limbless mammals ever, I wonder? This is a fun question that we have discussed before. Part of the answer is, well, so I guess the short answer is we don't know.
Yeah.
It is very likely that there's just something about mammal body shape that makes it harder to do that. One of the answers might be very simply that if you have no legs, you move by undulating, and mammal spines don't bend this way.
Same thought.
At some point in their evolution, mammals changed to an up-down bending of the spine rather than a side-to-side, which I imagine would make it a lot harder to undulate to move yourself over the ground. But also, most animals don't.
Yeah.
Like, there are a bunch of fish that have done it. There are a couple of times amphibians have done it, but mostly it's a lizard thing. This is something that lizards in particular are extraordinarily good at. There are no birds that have done it. I don't believe there are any archosaurs at all that have done it.
Mm-hmm.
Crocline, birdline, pterosaur, none of that group has done it. Turtles, of course, haven't done it. So the fact that mammals also have it, they come close, right? You've got like weasels and ferrets and also whales who have done something similar, but it might be specific restrictions of mammals, but it might also just be that it's a hard thing to do if you're not a lizard.
I also wonder about limb placement, because for both amphibians and lizards, their limbs are out the side, and so their belly is very close to the ground, and it's kind of like how like when crocs move on land, half the time they're not walking, they're just sliding, and like a lizard with very small limbs is already moving in a very snake-like way with its belly mostly on the ground, but mammal limbs are under the body. Like ours are in the way of our belly being on the ground. So you'd have to be you'd have to either get, it feels like you might have to get them out of the way. Like a mammal limbs would have to reposition for a legless lifestyle to be useful.
Yeah, because that's a really interesting point, because with lizards, the various stages between fully limbed and fully limbless, the ones that still have little legs are belly crawling and using their legs at the same time. But mammals with tiny legs don't belly crawl.
No, they're still just
like
walking.
Mammals with like a dachshund or a ferret or something, they aren't really adapted very well for belly crawling. And it is very interesting that the two major groups that have done putting the legs directly under the body, mammals and archosaurs, both have not done limbless forms.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might just be either it's a hard transition or there is something about their anatomy that like the belly is just not sturdy enough for that.
Yeah. Well, it's like the only mammal I can think of that belly crawls is like a seal.
Yes, that's true.
Which is an extremely specialized animal, and still not even close to being limbless. Like they've got all four limbs and they are critical to how they move around. Like their feet are how they swim for seals. So like they are also not even anywhere near losing their limbs, it seems. So yeah, it like kind of feels like mammal teeth, where it's just that's a thing we're really good at. Limbs are also a really big deal for mammal. Like we do a lot of really
Yeah.
crazy stuff with our limbs. Lizards are a bit more conservative with their limbs. They don't do you don't get mole-handed lizards the way you do with mammals who have done that multiple times. I'll just turn them into
Yeah.
shovels. So yeah,
Yeah. Interesting. I feel like every time that question comes up, we come up with another
yes,
addition to the answer.
yep. Because it is a very easy question to ask. Of mammals have gotten
Yeah.
so close. We have ferrets that are such flexible spines and are going down burrows and uh, uh, using this as a way to get to hard to reach prey. All things that it is suspected are key things to how snakes might have evolved.
Yes. And yet they're not doing it.
And yet they still run. They are
Yeah.
runners.
Oh, there's another. Oh, Ali said, as far as I know, ant larvae are a favorite prey of a lot of blind snakes. That makes sense.
Makes sense.
Zelfia asked, wait, what'd you say?
I just said just num 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 num. There's just so many of them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it'd be silly not to eat ants. Zelfia says, can you say more about directional spine movement? I work in spine research, so I'm fascinated, but I never thought of this before. Yes, the basic vertebrate body setup is that the spine has flexion laterally, side to side. This is why fish swim like this.
Yep.
And it's why snakes undulate like this, and it's why salamanders swim like this. At some point in mammal evolution, the spine of mammals made a shift so that it is more up and down, which is why dolphins swim like this.
Yes.
And whales swim like this.
We run and our spine is doing this. Lizards run and their spine is going side to side. And then on the flip side, like fish can't bend very well. Like a fish can't look up and down with a whole bunch of flexing because their spine does not move that way very well.
Now, I don't know off the top of my head what specifically it is that makes this difference. I do think, and this is sort of just anecdotally, that mammal vertebrae, I feel like, are sometimes wider than you see in a lot of other groups. Although I continue to think about it, and that's not real, because like crocs have pretty wide vertebrae.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that is really interesting, bringing it back to snakes, is that mammal vertebrae go basically like wall to wall against each other. And snakes, each vertebra connects with a ball and a cup. So every vertebra joins to the one behind it in kind of a ball and socket joint. It's not exactly that because the other parts of the vertebrae are also interlocking, but that ball and cup is part of what gives snakes a little bit of that extra flexibility, because snakes obviously are very good at side to side, but snakes are also really good at up and down.
Yes.
Snakes are extremely flexible in all directions.
Yeah.
Amazing. Great question. Alex asks, do you know of any snakes that can drop their tail? No. As far as I am aware, there are no snakes that can autotomize, that can drop their tail on purpose. Lots of lizards can do it, including lots of legless lizards.
Yeah.
Glass lizards, there were multiple groups called glass lizards because they drop their tails. So like here in the US, we've got glass lizards that do it. I think the American legless lizards also can drop their tails. There's a handful of lizards that do it, but snakes are one of the groups of lizards, like iguanas or monitors, I'm pretty sure don't do it. Snakes are one of the groups that just has never evolved that ability.
I remember that being one of the things I learned back in, I think this was in Boy Scouts, that we were learning about how to identify dangerous snakes and stuff. And it also, a part of that was also, here's how to identify whether it's a legless lizard or not. And we learned that they had eyelids, and we learned that they could lose their tail. And I think that was also where they were like, also their face just, they've got a back of the head and neck that snakes just don't have. Like, it's just different.
Yes. Yeah, once you've gotten a look at a bunch of them, legless lizards really just don't look like snakes.
Yep.
Especially like the, anguis, the lizards that we have in, well, we don't have anguis, we have pseudopus. Our like southeastern U.S. legless lizards really don't look very much like snakes.
No, it looks like a legless lizard.
Yes, and they've got an external ear.
Yes.
Which snakes don't have. Also, a lot of legless lizards have osteoderms, which is very cool. Our local legless lizards are covered in armor, and I don't believe there are any snakes with. There are some snakes with like thickened scales.
Yeah.
Or thickened skin. There's, I think it's it's like the rhinoceros python, some burrowing python. No, it's the Calabar python. I think it's the Calabar python, which is the one American. No, maybe it's the boa. Go back and listen to episode 196 when I knew what I was talking about. But I think it's the Calabar boa that has like super thick skin.
Cool.
Defensively, but snakes tend not to be armored.
Yeah.
And a bunch of legless skinks and glass lizards and grass lizards have osteoderms.
Yeah.
Which is very cool. Amazing. Sasha says, I imagine mammary placement will also be a problem for belly crawling, ventral surface contact that other groups don't have to work around. That is also an interesting point.
That is a very good point.
Mammals have the milk delivery system on the underside.
Yeah. You'd have to move those somewhere, which is not impossible. Like, there's lots of animals that have their mammary glands, like, effectively in their armpits. So, like,
yes,
they don't have to be
point out,
in the middle.
Cetaceans have them in, like, a fold where it's enclosed.
Yes.
So, but that is a really interesting point, that it could be one of the things that makes it that much harder.
Well, I also wonder if it's integument. Like, snakes have scales, and they came from scaly ancestors. Reptiles have scales, which is this very tough, very resilient body covering. So sliding that along the ground makes all the sense because it can take it. Most mammal skins are not great at that. We would need a very specialized calloused structure to be able to do that. So it's not that it would be impossible. There are scale-ish, ish mammals out there, pangolins and armadillos and stuff, but it is not the default mammal skin to be able to just rub that along the rocks and branches and climb that tree bark. Be very unpleasant, it seems.
Nadia asks, do any extant snakes have vestigial hips? Not really. There are a bunch of groups of snakes, boas and pythons famously, but also some other early branching snakes that still have leg remnants. So like what appears to be what's left of the femur. And I think maybe some of them have possibly remnant hip bones, but it might just be some other leg bit. I don't know. I think there might be like what is thought to maybe be one of the hip bones that is remaining in some of these snakes, but typically it's leg bone remnants. But there are plenty of snakes still around today that do have vestigial leg bones in the lower part of the body. Go check out the episode 221 that we just did, and we talked all about that.
Yeah.
For when I remember it. Amazing. Yeah, Sasha says, the chafing was my first thought.
Yeah. Just sounds unpleasant. It just sounds unpleasant to be a legless mammal.
I wouldn't want to do it. Amazing. This has been super fun. You keep saying stuff, maybe we'll go, but we're just about the end of our time. Happy World Snake Day, everybody.
Yeah.
This has been a very exciting snake month. Remember that for the rest of July, the Snake Stuff channel is open in the Discord so that you can go chit chat about snakes, share pictures of snakes, all sorts of good stuff like that. Remember that we have our Q&A coming up on Discord next weekend, where we will do yet more Q&A about snakes and snake paraphernalia with our Discord audience. And the Snakes and Crocs tier is still available on Patreon. It is only open till the end of July. If you miss it, you have to wait till next summer to sign up in it. Donations that we receive at the Snakes and Crocs tier during this month will contribute to donations we will be making towards Save the Snakes, the Crocodile Research Coalition, and the National Parks Conservation Association. At the end of the summer, your donations not only allow us to continue doing the podcast this month, they will also help to protect environments and reptiles around us.
Yeah.
Which is great. Great. Amy. Oh, Amy said hi before. Hi, Amy. Amy's not going to be at the Royal Tyrrell. My son at U of Alberta in Edmonton. That's awesome. Congratulations and best of luck to your son.
Yes.
Nadia asked, did snake analogs evolve from amphibians in the Paleozoic? Kind of. There were legless or leg-reduced temnospondyls in the Paleozoic. Certainly in the Mesozoic. No, they were in the Paleozoic. Lepospondylus, I believe, were pretty known for doing this, but they were more aquatic. So they were more like sirens among salamanders today, which are also very limb reduced.
Yep. Yeah, I also saw Thomas mentioning that maybe mammals would need to be marine first before they could do limblessness, which I could see a limbless marine mammal.
Sure.
Especially if you're like an open ocean and that's just you find a body shape that is super efficient at moving, because eels are typically good at like nooks and crannies, but at least from things I've seen, are surprisingly efficient swimmers because they've used their entire body to create the hydrofoils that they are swimming with. But so I could see something like that of a whale just eventually becoming just a big long tail fluke, effectively just your entire body is a swimming structure. But yeah, it feels like it would be a very specialized thing for mammals to do. They also have to breathe air, which makes it harder maybe for them to be eely.
Yeah. I wonder if you could get an arboreal limbless mammal.
Yeah.
That just travels over the branches like this.
Yep.
Wonderful. Listeners, thank you all so much for joining us for this stream. These are super fun. We have a great time geeking out about our favorite animals, all in the interest of spreading awareness and education and supporting conservation efforts and coexistence efforts with these animals. One of the things that both of our chosen groups of animals have in common is that a history of difficult relationships with humans. And so getting to turn that into making donations to conservation, sharing some conservation-related news, and just spreading appreciation for these animals is extremely fun and extremely rewarding. And we're thrilled that we get to do that because we have so many people who want to engage with us.
Yeah, no, it's very nice getting to focus in on them, both because we love talking about them, but also because they deserve to be looked at as more than just movie monsters and scary pests.
Yes. Check out the latest episodes if you haven't already. They're about crocs and snakes. Head over to our Patreon if you are inclined, if you aren't already there, and can consider joining at the Snakes and Crocs tier. Hop in the Discord and join the chats there and continue to follow us and engage with us. One last question. Nadia asked, were there Deinosuchus-like snakes that ate dinosaurs? There were not gigantic snakes during the Mesozoic, although Sanaja is a small, big snake that was found in the sauropod nest and
Mm-hmm.
appears to have maybe been hungrily eyeing baby sauropods. So there you go.
Well, it's like we have snakes today that are eating deer-sized prey, and there were plenty of dinosaurs that would have fallen with it. So like, not taking down big
Yes.
hadrosaurs, but small dinosaurs would absolutely be potentially on the menu for similarly sized snakes back then.
And Cretaceous Madsoia is thought to have gotten to maybe 5, maybe even 6 meters. So
Especially like the small dromaeosaurs and like ones living in the trees.
Oh yeah,
like they'd be getting eaten by
well,
snakes left and right.
There were birds by then, and we have snakes that eat birds today. There are snakes that eat dinosaurs today.
Yeah, so like definitely, just not
All
Dinosuchus
right,
style.
Leave. Yes, exactly. Bye, everybody.
Bye.